And well, okay, so I'm going, like I mentioned, I'm going to see if we can switch this to slideshow view. Okay. Okay, so we will be recording the session, so feel free to turn off your camera if you prefer not to be recorded from this. Okay, so this morning I'm going to give some basic introductions and just talk a little bit about myself and my background. We'll talk a little bit because we're talking about our changing world and social media. So we're going to talk a little bit about individual rights and opposing groups, and then I put down their lack of common sense. So we'll discuss that briefly. We'll talk a little bit about social media growth and dangers and benefits, and then how are you guiding your children or your teen? If we have enough people, we'll split into breakout rooms. Otherwise, we'll just stay in this room and chat about that all together. Okay, and then at the end, I'll end off with some action steps for that section. Okay, so let me just chat a little bit about who I am. So my academic side, I've taught over 1,000 high school students and university students. So my focus has been most of my career with teenagers or young adults between the ages of 15, 16 up to age 22, 24. But I've also worked with newcomer adults in Canada and in Winnipeg. I have my master's in teaching ESL teachers, and motivational teaching strategies was my thesis focus. I've helped, and my wife and I have both helped with newcomers and international students settle into life in Canada. So every day, every week for the last 15, 18 years, we are interacting and talking with people from different countries. TOEFL and IELTS, which are academic exams for university entrance. I've been teaching strategies and helping people with those skills since 2007. And so usually when I'm interacting with people, it's when they're here in Canada, but I'm now looking to see how I can help people in high school or junior high, whether they're in Canada or before they arrive in Canada. Okay. And so my passion is to work with teens and help them improve their mental health, especially in today's age with social media, which we'll talk about today, but also just physical health, emotional, spiritual, and their financial knowledge. Okay, but I've also done other things. I'm not just an academic person in the classroom. So I used to import handicrafts from Indonesia. I've started several small businesses, and I've invested in real estate, renovated houses here in Winnipeg, and helped Canadians and newcomers understand money management and get out of debt. So I have one son, and some of you who know my son, you might think, oh, he looks so young in that picture. This was taken a few years ago. Can anyone guess where this picture was taken?
Yes, I know.
Yeah, Mohammed knows because you joined last week. Can you tell us where this picture was taken?
I think this is in China, right?
Yes, correct. So it was at the Great Wall of China. And
I wanted to say.
Oh, did you? Okay, yeah, yeah. So you're familiar, Max. And I chose this picture because we brought a Frisbee that said Canada, and then when we were on top of the wall, that's when we took this picture. And then there's a picture with my wife Lucy and I. So this was in 2015. So this was several years ago. But I did want to talk also about my son, who's 18, just because not only have I taught lots of teenagers and young adults, but also my son, I've raised my son with some of the things that I'll talk about today and next week. So athletically, he was in gymnastics, baseball, and parkour, which is like a running along an obstacle course. He was and has been in musical arts, choir, band, musical theater. And he just left South Korea yesterday. So he's been on a 6-month program where they were 3 months training for a performance in theater arts. And then they were in England for 5 weeks and then South Korea for 5 weeks. And then in the end of June, he's going to New York to help with a program there for 2 weeks as a leader in musical theater and sports with students from Asia who come for 2 weeks to the US. He likes Minecraft, so I thought I'd throw that in there. He's not all just athletics or music or academics, but Minecraft and other video games he plays a lot with his friends. But he did focus on academics, so his grade average in a core subjects was 95%. And one thing I want to highlight and talk about with how we're raising our kids, when I grew up, I went to summer camps for 1 or 2 weeks in the summer. And so my priority for him was for him also to go in the summertime. So from the time he was 6 or 7, he would go and stay a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks at a summer camp. And that gave him an environment where there was other trusted adults that could help him, and also with kids. And so compared to his friends, many who just stayed home and watched movies or played video games, he was out talking with people. And the last 3 years, he's now worked in the summertime full-time to help with smaller children at the camp. So he's now become one of the counselors. And so that's put him in an environment where he's leading, growing, interacting with others. Okay, and for those of you that know him, know that he's friendly and interactive. And one thing that's a value for me is being able to talk to a range of people, kids, adults, seniors, and Matthew's been in that environment and has that ability as well. I did fail him in one area I want to mention. So I wanted to take him to 10 countries by the time he was age 10, but I failed that. Now I was close. We went to 9 countries by the time he was 10 years old. So either we lived in those countries or visited them. And I don't have it in these slides, but he just finished visiting. When he went to South Korea, that was now his 21st country, and he's 18 now. So he's been able to basically have travel to a country every year, but some years he hasn't traveled because of COVID or other reasons. But this year he had a chance to travel and be in 8 or 9 different countries. And that's what he's been doing this year. So from last September to December, he went to 5 European countries, and he was helping in each country with different activities. It was with a program where they would meet with people from that country. So here, the person on the right with the white face is an American. The person on the left is a person in Romania, and they had supplies that they took to the Ukrainian border within Romania. Then he traveled and went to other countries in Europe. And then, as I mentioned, he's in a performing arts program. So this is what some of the activities and pictures from the play that they've been doing the last few months. It's a program that has people from around the world gather together and participate for 6 months in this program. So that's a little bit about me and my background. So let's jump into today's topic. And I don't have a lot of details in this section, but maybe some of you can comment a bit on this. I've seen a shift over the last 20 or 25 years, because when I was growing up, we looked at what would be beneficial for the community. And I think in the last 15 or 20 years, there's been a shift towards what's best for one person or a small group of people. And sometimes what they're doing pushes aside what the majority of people think or are doing. Any comments on that, or any thoughts, either from your experience from your country of origin or from your time here in Canada?
Trevor, I can talk a little bit. I mean that
Yep.
I also noticed this change. I mean that individuals are more encouraged to demonstrate or display their personality, their their special points, special aspects, right?
Yeah.
I think it is like more like that. I mean, especially in China, when Chairman Mao, right, in his age, I think the whole China is just everybody is, for example, in the same uniform, like
Okay. Yeah.
right, and everybody is the same. And anytime you are doing something different, you will be laughed at. But nowadays, I think they are like young people are liberalized, right? And
Right.
I think this is kind of what should I say? It's kind of stepping to the right direction, as long as when the individual I don't know how to say, using his rights, right?
Okay.
As long as they are not bring damage or hazards to the whole society, right? I think that's should be encouraging. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think over time, cultures were kind of trying to have everyone the same, be uniform. And so to have individual expression has its benefits. But if they're insisting, if a few people or a group are insisting this is how everyone should be acting, now it's turning the other way from that. Donna, I'm curious, do you have any thoughts or reflections on this, just of what you've seen as someone who's grown up and lived in Canada?
I agree with you, Trevor. I think things have changed to become more individualistic. I think, though, in North American culture, we've always been encouraged to be individual to some extent, right? Without, here's an idiom, rocking the boat or causing a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
You've still been encouraged to be unique and individual, and we celebrate those things, right? I recently learned a saying, and it was the nail that's whose head is sticking up gets hammered down.
Yeah.
So that's not how we feel in Canada so much, but some other cultures, it's like, no, you want to be part of the group. You don't want to stand out so much. But in Canada, we want to. But the shift, especially since COVID, instead of just celebrating who you are as an individual, it's been more about proclaiming your rights as an individual.
Yeah.
And saying, well, the individual right is more important than the group's right. And so we have shifted, I think, further over, especially since COVID, to individual rights as opposed to what's best for the group.
Yeah. Yeah. From that. Okay. I'll just highlight or look at and kind of pull this together. So I think also what I've seen is a trend where it's not a lot of dialogue and interaction between different groups. It seems that groups are being pushed to different sides. And I'm speaking more of North America, but I'll point to both Canada and the US. We have the Democrats and the Republicans in the US. In Canada, we have the Liberals and the Conservatives. And then we have, to a lesser extent, NDP, New Democratic Party. But within those groups, it's, if you're kind of saying, well, I like this about this side, it's like, well, no, you're either on one side or you're on the other side. And that can be challenging because I see more and more there's walls being set up between different groups, whether it's politically or within different settings as well, that I think is causing miscommunications, more hatred, more and social media, I think, is providing more platforms excuse me, is providing more platforms for people to express their opinion, but also to speak negatively of those that don't have the same opinion as they do. Okay.
Trevor, can you explain a little bit about polarizing?
Yeah, sure. Polarize means to separate or different parts of the pole. So when we talk of geography, we talk about the North Pole and the South Pole. So those are two poles. In this context, we're talking about viewpoints or positions. So you're someone on the right or you're someone on the left in terms of politics, or I'm you know, in favor of some activities or actions, but someone else is totally against some of that.
So it's
I'll
like
give it
groups are like stepping further away from each other, something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So if you think of magnets, magnets can attract each other or repel. So
I
go
see.
towards each other or put, and this is in a sense where instead of the groups having a chance to dialogue and discuss, like I think you've seen, and even through this past week, and there will be more, I think, today and tomorrow, but there's going to be different walks in favor of different lifestyles in different cities across North America. And you're going to see groups standing there and then shouting at each other. Or if you look at some of the political rallies, you know, we know there's elections coming up next year in the US. If you go to any of those rallies, you're going to have groups of people on both sides, but they're not just, hi, how's it going? Let's talk about it. There's anger and hatred. I saw a short video clip of our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, walking 1 or 2 weeks ago. And as he was walking, there was security all around him because there were people on the side just scream, like not just saying, we don't like you, but screaming at him. And, you know, you can disagree with somebody, but it's come to a point where it's done with almost a hatred and a move towards violence. So. Okay.
Thank you.
So I think, and I wanted to phrase or have this at the start of the context, a discussion about social media, because this highlights quite clearly, as we move in these directions, social media has allowed people to express their individual rights, which again, I think there has its benefits, but also to push information. Like if I'm supporting one specific group, then the algorithms, the way that Facebook and Twitter and other groups show me more information will continue to feed me that information. And we almost end up living in little bubbles where I'm seeing only information that favors my opinion or viewpoint. And that means that I'm rarely having a chance to see someone else's viewpoint or understand why are they saying that? Why are they doing those things? Okay. I'm just going to jump over the lack of common sense. But basically it's just identifying, or, you know, we used to say, okay, this makes sense, let's do this. And nowadays you see people where they're doing things that don't seem to make sense, whether it's teens or adults. Okay, so when I talk about social media, there's more than just these, but these are some of the biggest groups: YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, which is owned by Meta, the company Meta, you know, Snapchat, TikTok, LinkedIn. There's many more. I didn't include WeChat, which has hundreds of millions or even billions of users. I didn't include Lime or Telegram, which are also common platforms. But in general, platforms we use to interact. And if you think about our kids, YouTube started in the 2000s. Facebook started a bit before that, but WhatsApp, Instagram was 2012. Snapchat, I think, was 2012 or 2014. TikTok, the last 3 or 5 years. Our kids have grown up with this, if we have kids that are from 0 to 18. So for them, it's normal. For those of us on this call today, we had to learn how to use it. We didn't have this when we were children or even 20, 25 years ago. Well, I think I just gave you the answer, but how many years old approximately is social media? So has it been about 50 years, 30 years, 10 years? What would you estimate?
$25 years.
Okay, yeah, and I think we can say about 20 to 25 years, because we're in 2023 now. If we look back with some of these, you know, the internet was around, but it really took off from 96, 97 and beyond that. And then, as I mentioned, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, all of these have been in the last, you know, 2004, 2008, 2012, up until today. Can anyone guess how many active users are on Instagram per month? And I know several different people have different accounts. I also know that there's robots that send out information, but information that's put out there on Instagram each month, can anyone guess how many that is?
I have no idea, but I'll guess 1 million.
A million? Okay. Any other
Or maybe
guesses?
5 million?
5 million?
Hundreds?
Hundreds? Hundreds of millions? So again, it doesn't mean that this is the number of people, but that it's the number of accounts where something is posted every month. It's 1 billion. They estimate, yeah, so there's other statistics that I can pull up that, because I talk about this in my classes with my students when we talk about positive and negative with social media. I have them give an overview, but there's several billion accounts on Instagram. And again, doesn't mean that's how many people, but more or less, it's rare that one person would have 3 or 4 accounts. So it's at least several billion people on Instagram, and 1 billion every month or something's being posted or liked or sent out with them. Okay, and then this one I think is a very interesting total. So 2,500 new videos, 183 hours are uploaded on YouTube every. Would you think that's every second, every minute, every hour, or every day?
Every minute?
Every minute. Okay, any other guesses?
Every hour.
Every hour. Okay. Okay,
I'm gonna say every second.
every second. Okay, so we have A, B, and C. We know it's not every day because it's more than that, but yeah, so in this setting, it's every minute. And I don't have the information right in front of me, but I remember reading that if you look at the amount of information we had access to, so in the 1500s, 500-600 years ago, we had access to just a few stories and pieces of information. And then as time went, there was the printing press, there were books now spread around the world. Then we moved into the internet era, we call it the information age. And so we've passed the point where we can understand most ideas and concepts. And this is one area with our school system. Our school system was set up 100 to 200 years ago, but it's teaching information that not all the information is what we use. And I can have a whole nother webinar just about the school system and our education system. But the point is here, every minute, 183 hours are being uploaded. So your kids, my kid, my son, the people around us, we're getting so much information out there. We can't follow all of it. We have to think about how to select or choose what we're going to watch or how we're going to spend our time. And this is where, with our cell phone being so convenient, I talk with many, many teens who, what did you do last night? Oh, I spent 2 hours on YouTube or on TikTok. What did you do? Well, TikTok is short videos, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So they're just swiping from video to video to video, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of spending that time. Okay. So I'm not going to read all of these, but a lot of comments of why we use it, staying up to date with events, finding something that's funny, fill up our spare time, stay in touch with what our friends are doing, share opinions, even down to number 10, meet new people. There's a lot of ways that people are using social media with this. Okay. So let's just chat for a couple of minutes, and I want to hear from you. And this is where I'm going to actually, I'm going to go back so that I can, yeah. So I'm going to type in some of the information that you give us. And I'll start, there's 2 that I started this with. So there's something called FOMO, which means fear of missing out. And so many times our teens or children are on social media because they're, well, I want to see what my friend posted, or there's this new dance going around on TikTok. I might miss the latest information, the different trends, different food, different hairstyles. So I fear missing out. So I go onto social media to try to watch more of what's happening. Cyberbullying is another danger, but let me hear from you. What are other dangers you can think about with social media?
Viewing or hearing age inappropriate material.
Good.
You know, younger children having access to things that are not good for them.
Okay, good. Okay, what else?
Phishing, scamming.
Good. Yeah. It's funny because I actually just talked about phishing with one class. I was a substitute teacher last week, and then the topic was about phishing or scamming. And I said to the students, it's not fishing, it's pronounced fishing, but it's not fishing for the actual fish. Okay, good. Other dangers that we have in social media?
It's also a harm to your health if you
Mhm.
stick to it. I mean, that you cannot take yourself out of it for, right? It's
Yeah. And I think there's different aspects. Maybe shortly I'll show, because I left it upstairs in our house, but I have a book talking about the mental health side of social media. And there's different sections where, I mean, one, if we're seeing things that we can't get or that are above us, you see the fancy cars and the, you know, the handsome men, the beautiful women, we start to look at those things and say, well, I'm not like that, and we get depressed or discouraged. But also we're not, instead of dealing with issues and problems and communicating with friends and family, instead we're using social media as an escape, and that's hurting our relationships with that and our mental health. Okay, anything else? Sorry, you're on mute, Donna.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sexual exploitation, sexual like luring or abuse of children.
Yep. Good. Okay, so yeah. Okay. So often when we as parents are looking at social media, then we're looking at some of these different things and saying, well, this, you know, social media is all bad. And that can be a viewpoint that we have. But let me just let me see if I can go down. So I just want to share a couple of things. So I'm going to change the screen. Okay, are you able to see the new screen share?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So it gives a few statistics from this website, and I have the links in the PowerPoint, which I can share later. But in 2017, 69% of adults were using social media. I think now, 5 years later, that number, 6 years later, that number would be much higher, compared to 5% in 2005. One reason was it wasn't around, as I mentioned earlier. But mental health issues have increased. So this is within North America, but so some of these statistics may not be worldwide, but 97% of teens between the age of 13 and 17 have at least one account. Okay. And that, so that means it could be Snap. Well, here it shows you, but you know, so 70% of 13 to 17 and 78 of 18 to 24 are on Snapchat, it's about 70 on Instagram, 50% of Facebook, but that goes to 80% for those a bit older, you know, Twitter, YouTube, etc. So you can see that if there's things posted in there that are inappropriate or negative or encouraging students or teens to do something that's not healthy for them, then this can be quite a negative thing because so many people are on social media. Okay, so rate of suicidal thoughts in young adults has increased 47% from 2008 to 2017, so over those 10 years. For about 40% of adults see social media use as harmful. 25% of teens say that social media is having a negative impact, and yet we stay on it. You know, 8 to 12-year-olds have found that over a 5-year period, that depressive symptoms had increased by 33%, and suicide rate for girls in the group had increased by 65%, self-harm, etc. Now, I know that there's different studies that have been released. I was reading one recently saying these are not accurate. This is not the true picture. It's not just because of social media that we have an increase in these areas of depression, suicide, etc. But it's interesting that there is a correlation. As social media use has increased, there have been more statistics and information showing that there's been an increase in mental health issues. And I think this other website also helped highlight 88% of teens have seen someone be mean or cruel to another person. 12% say they witness unpleasant behavior frequently. This one in the middle here, I can't highlight it, but 55% of parents of 12-year-olds said their child was on Facebook. 76% said they helped their child gain access. I want to comment on that. Does anyone know what the minimum age is to be on Facebook or any of these social media platforms? Okay, do you know how old you're supposed to be in order to be able to set up an account?
12 years old.
Okay, well, it's close. It's actually 13. So 55% of the parents in the survey said, yeah, our child's already on, and we helped them get on Facebook, knowing that it's illegal. I mean, for them to have their own account. But 76% of those parents, so about 40% of parents in general, have said they've helped their child get on Facebook because their friends are on it or because of other reasons or things from that. So I just wanted to highlight that parents are not only, or I should say it this way, some parents are not monitoring their children or setting good boundaries or guidelines with their kids. In fact, there's many who are encouraging their kids to go on, even to break the rules in order to be part of the social media trend. So I think that's relevant with what we've been talking about. So let me just go back, because that's a lot of negative things and things that are not always helpful. But let's look at and see, give me some feedback with some positive things. What are some benefits of the social media? So I've added in there, communicate with friends and family. What else can we see that is positive from social media?
You can easily share information with I don't know how to say this, like co-workers or people in the same business.
Okay, yep. Okay, and so what I'll do is I'll broaden that a little bit.
Networking.
Networking.
Networking, okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Okay, networking, good, thank you. What else is beneficial from social media?
Like if you have business, you reach more customers.
Okay,
You can
yeah.
post your ad. you can reach more, you can get more customers for your business.
Good. Okay. And what about if we think in terms of our teenagers or young adults? What can be some benefits that and some of these are relevant with that, because I know teenagers that are 17 or 18 and they're on Instagram selling cakes or selling jewelry or bracelets, etc. But what might be some other benefits for our teens to be on social media? It's harder to think of these than it is of the negative things.
I think they can find some interesting information about medicine, about
Yep.
how
So-
bake cake.
Okay, yeah. So can I say learn new information?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, exactly. Before social media, they didn't have access to a lot of things around the world and you know, whether it's culture, whether it's history, whether it's a new way to do their hair or, you know, many areas. Okay, good. Okay.
Maybe to make new friends. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And that actually was listed, I think, oops, let me just get the font the same. Make new friends. Yeah, and I think that idea was listed up here with, like, a lot of my friends are on them and I can just stay in touch with what my friends are doing. And then I think meet new people was number 10 within that. So yeah, like, so I think we always have to identify with anything that's neutral that we can use for good or bad, like money or things. We have to say, okay, we have benefits, we have these dangers, so how are we going to manage and work with this? Okay. So I'm just going to switch back to current slide, larger view, now that I'm done filling things in. So let me just ask your opinions. Why should teens be allowed to use, or maybe I should say it a little bit differently. What age should teens be allowed to use social media? Maybe I'll switch this. What would you be comfortable with your teenagers or children accessing social media? Okay.
14 years old.
14 years old. Okay, good. And Mohammed, I know that you have, you know, you have 5 kids and several teenagers, so this is relevant, especially for you.
Yeah, and this year we allow them
Okay,
to get enter to the social media,
okay,
and it's for us there is more positive things for
Mhm.
them.
Yeah.
They can communicate with their friends about the homeworks and stuff.
Right.
Also about our religion, like I believe my boys,
Yep.
like I saw my son yesterday. He listened for the Quran
Okay.
from Instagram. This is the positive thing for us.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, and Donna, I know that you raised teenagers because your children are a little bit older. How did you handle or manage social media with your children?
Well, my kids are now 28 and 24. So when my daughter was a teenager, maybe about 14, I think she got her first cell phone, and it was not a smartphone immediately.
Yep.
So we were in a little different position. And then by the time, I mean, my son would have been like 17 at that time. So we didn't have to navigate that quite so much.
Well, that's true, but yeah.
But there were issues still with communication even at 14, 15 with the cell phones that we had to deal with, inappropriate communication.
Mhm.
that we had to identify and then put a stop to.
Right, yep. Yep. And I think just as we raise our kids when they're 3 and 5 and 7, you know, as teenagers, we still have discussions and talk about different guidelines, but there's more of a face to like, it's more of a, I'm not going to say it's equal because there's parents and children, whether they're 5 years old or 15 or 50, there's still that level. But I'll say that there's a, when our kids are 3 and 5, it's more of this is what we do or how we do things. When they're 14, 15, 16, it's more, okay, how will our, what's your opinion on this? How do we interact? Okay, well, this is what I want to see. So how do we make that happen? Or is this reasonable? I had discussions with my son about cell phone usage, about a TV in his room, which he wanted when he was 14 or 15 or even younger, about when he would go to bed, all of these things. I didn't just come in and say, okay, you're in bed by 9:30 every night and there's the, but we were able to have more of a dialogue as they're a bit older with some of these areas or issues. Okay. With our time, because I want to keep these webinars to about an hour, so I'm going to just go through a couple of sections here. So I have these questions within this setting. And I think what I'd like to do is just hear your opinions. Maybe I'll just go back up. So let's just look at these in groups. So do you see social media as negative, mostly positive, or neutral? And then have you talked with your teens about the dangers of social media? Okay. So let's start with those two questions, and feel free for everyone to unmute yourselves unless it's noisy in the background, and then let's see what your thoughts are on this. And if you don't have teens, you can think about, nieces and nephews, or you can think about, even if your children are younger than teens, within that. Okay. So let's start with the first one. So do you see social media as mostly negative, mostly positive, or neutral?
I think I look at more on the positive side.
Yeah.
It's the reality. It's the development of the society, right? You cannot avoid it.
Yeah.
So as long as you, you don't just immerse yourself into it too long a time, right? It should be, something that we need to face.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And have you talked or like with your son, what has been your interaction about cell phones and social media?
I haven't, that we haven't get him a cell phone or anything, but I did help him with a teenager Facebook, right?
Okay. Yep.
Messenger, something.
Yep. Yep.
So, and I haven't talked with him about the dangers or anything.
Yeah.
Because he's still pretty much within our supervision.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, it doesn't sound like he's, alone in his room for hours where he can just scroll through, different things, which some kids are. As soon as they're 6 or 8, they're able to access everything that's on their cell phone and on the internet. Okay, good. Yeah, no, I think that's good. Okay. How about for some of the others who are on our call today? Have you talked with your teens or children about the dangers of social media?
Yeah, I talk with my kids about when I allow them to have. Actually, they have only Instagram and WhatsApp. Like
Okay.
WhatsApp for to chat with each other, like the family. Instagram to communicate with friends. So yeah, I talk with them like, as long as you keep watch them, like monitor
Mhm.
them.
Yeah.
It's okay, but you have to keep chat with them about the dangerous thing, like which one is scam or
Yeah.
like bad videos they can post it Instagram. Yeah. So every few days, like 1 week, 10 days, we sit and talk about that.
Excellent. Okay, good. Okay, does anyone else want to share or feel comfortable sharing?
I think with anything, as with anything else, even good things can be corrupted or used for negative purposes. So there's lots of people out there who want to use things for a negative purpose, whatever that might be. But I think it can be mostly positive. I'm not on social media a lot, so it's different for me.
Right.
I find that sometimes for me, it's the difficulty is that people present their lives in a very curated way. So they
Mhm.
show things in a very perfect light sometimes.
Right.
And it's hard to for me to say, oh, well, my life's not perfect like that. And to realize that, well, their life isn't perfect too. They're just showing the good things. So a lot of people who can't discern or don't understand that they're just showing the good parts, it could make them feel bad about their own
Yep.
circumstances. So there's that mental health piece. But one thing I did learn when I took a sociology program was it's not using social media, it's consuming. We're consuming media, right? So it's so when you look at it as a consuming thing, when you think of consuming, you're eating, you're digesting,
Right.
like it becomes more than just viewing. It becomes something that shapes who you are and
Good
for
point.
positive or negative.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, those are good, some good thoughts. Okay, anyone else?
I think social media mostly negative because we spend a lot of time here. And for my son, I'm always say very scary story about
Yep.
this about social media because you never know who speak conversation with you on other side.
Right.
And so it's very dangerous. And I notice that kids not don't have uh, social skills in real life.
Yep. Yep. Yep, that's true. And that's, as we're looking at different things and in different settings, I can see things that don't, maybe somebody's experienced that, but that doesn't mean that that's how it is every day or every minute for that person or that setting. Okay. Okay, so I'm curious, just to talk a bit about rules, and some of you have mentioned it already, but do you have specific rules with the cell phone use or social media? Okay, so Mohammed, you mentioned for your kids when they're 14. Max, you mentioned with your son, he's able to access like a teenage social media. He has an account there, but you're still supervising him a lot. Donna, you mentioned your teens were, just getting cell phones. If we think 10, 15 years ago, then it makes sense of they were just starting to get popular and being used by many people. But are there specific rules that you have for your teenagers or children about when they can use it and how long they can use social media?
Like from beginning, I talk with them. You can use them after you finish your work, like homeworks and stuff like that.
Yep.
For 1 hour. But I think now they go for more than that, like 2-3 hours every day. And
Okay.
so far it's okay, but more than that is not good
Right. Yep.
for that age. I mean,
Yes. Yep. Okay. Good. Yeah. So there's things they have to do first, and then it's seen as more of a a relaxing or treat time rather than you come home and sit down and start with that. Okay, good. Okay, anyone else?
When my kids were younger and this was starting, we had the rule about the computer and then later the phones that
Yep.
they were not allowed to clear their history. So if we maybe thought there was a problem, we weren't spying on them, but if we
Yep.
thought maybe we needed to see what they were up to, they weren't allowed to clear their history on the browsers so that we could see. And they always knew that was a possibility, that we could look at it at any time
Right. Okay, yeah, that's
to
good.
keep them accountable.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't include it in this information, but there are programs that you can either buy, or there's some I think even that are free. And they allow you to view everything that's been viewed, even when you go into incognito mode and you can set up the devices to go through that process or software or whatever it is. And so I think if parents install it without telling their teens, I think that can cause problems and show a lack of trust. But if you start by saying, we're going to install this, and this is so that we can see and just be honest with everything, because there's negative things out there that we know will not be helpful for you. And then over time, you can check in from time to time with that. Okay, good. Anyone else that would like to share their rules they've had?
I don't know if I mean that the rules are really something good, or I don't have rules, but I think what we do is that we keep him very busy.
Yes.
So he doesn't have that much time on the internet.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, when he's really using it, he is staying at home with us, right? So we can.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that if it is a good idea to have rules, or if they don't really follow, are you gonna fight or what?
Right.
So,
yeah.
yeah. So I think we just keep him busy, like sports activities. That's our situation.
Yeah. Well, and that's one reason why I showed at the start of the slide. Some people think I'm bragging when I talk about my son, and sometimes I am, but that's one of the reasons why I show, the activities that he was involved with. I made an environment, and Max, it sounds like you've also made an environment where your child's involved in different activities and they are busy and with that. And what you said actually brings me to my last question in this section. So if you're setting up some rules or guidelines and your teen is frustrated with it, then how do you handle that? And I'll preface this from what you said, Max. Do we need rules? I think the question is, as our teens get older, how do we go from monitoring and being involved with everything to then letting go and helping them make more and more independent decisions? And because I think for some parents, they just set rules that are not always realistic. The rules stay the same for many, many years. So when the child is finally free at age 17, 18, 19, and away from their parents' influence, they go and then do everything they were not allowed to do. So that's one danger that I've seen with a parent, that style of parenting. Or I think if no rules are set, then there's the process of when they have to follow rules in real life. For example, if the parents have not set some guidelines that they've learned some self-discipline at different stages as they grow up, then once they hit that reality in real life, where they have to follow rules about driving or about, drinking alcohol or other things, if they, how do we help them develop the knowing what's good or not so good? Okay. But so let's comment or talk about some of those things. So if you've set some rules or you've said, okay, this is what we have to do, your child or teen is frustrated with it, how do you handle that? Or what do you, yeah, what do you do? So, Mohammed, maybe I'll pick on you for a few minutes, get your feedback. But, having multiple kids in the household, having them with different interests and different activities. I know that you also have your kids in lots of sports, but if you've set some rules, let's say that you set an hour a day and now they're spending more time. So you say, okay, no more than 2 hours a day. They're a bit older. If they disagree with that, what will you do with that process?
Yeah. So, as you know, I have 5 kids. 3 of them are now in grade 9, and they have a lot of stuff to do for homeworks, and so sometimes, and I keep, as I said, Max said, like I try to keep my kids busy as well.
Right.
Like they have a football activity at the school, and they have soccer now, basketball as well. So now they have every 2 days they have soccer game or soccer practice,
Yeah.
and they like to attend this activity. So sometimes if they have work to do,
Yeah.
I not like I tell them, you cannot go for the game before you finish your work.
Okay. Yeah.
And they tried to say no after when we come back, and I said no, you have to finish first and you will go, because
Right.
I know when they come back they will be tired.
Yep.
So
Yep.
and yeah, this is what I try to do with them. But they they are now, as I said last time, they are 90s. The score in the school, they are 90s. They are very good.
Yeah.
And that's why I let them go for social media, like for Instagram. And in for today and tomorrow they have 3 games. My boys, they have 3 games.
Okay.
So I told them, if you're not, they have also exam. If you're not finished before you go, I will cancel both of them. So now they are study upstairs.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So you've set some guidelines and you have consequences. If they're not going to do this, then this other thing is going to get canceled. And
Yes.
I think that's helping them realize our actions have results and consequences. Okay. Good. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Because I know I'm not the only one that had a fight with my son, or if you had
No.
others,
No.
So what did so this is a good time. Anyone else want to share when you were in a time that was frustrating, your child or teen was not agreeing with what you were talking about? How did you handle that?
I think it's very important to explain my son or daughter or children why.
Good.
Why, no?
Yes. Yep. Yep. And that shows that there's a dialogue. It's not just mom says this or dad says this. It's okay, well, here's why we want to do this. And I know as my son was getting older, so 12, then 14, then 16, I had some very insightful conversations with him, because I sometimes would say, well, no, it's this way. And then he'd say, but Dad, here's what I'm seeing. Here's, and if I allowed him a chance to share his viewpoint, then I could better understand why he was feeling that way or why he was frustrated. Because I grew up in a farm in a small village area in Canada, and my interaction and social life was very limited to just the people in the school I went to. I went to a school, we had 40 people that graduated in my class. My son's group that graduated was 370 or 380. So he's in a city where there's, totally different environment. So if I would have applied the same rules I grew up with, whether they were good or bad, but if I would have applied those same rules to him, that wouldn't have been reasonable. So I had to decide, what are the values, and then what do I want him to do in the future? I want him to be independent. I want him to make good choices, and I want him to be able to express his feelings and ideas. So if he would disagree with me and I would just overrule him or argue or say, no, you're wrong, that would mean that the values I have for him, I would not be allowing him to grow in those areas. So I think that's, last week I chatted a bit, and next week I'll talk a bit more, but as we think about what are we preparing our teen and children for, it's for them to be independent, functioning adults. Let me just tell a very quick story. I know our time's going, but when our son was 3 or 4 years old, I was in Indonesia, and someone said to me, how do you get your child to sit while they're eating? Because in Indonesia, and again, this is a generalization, but I saw many times the children until age 5 or 6, they would walk around and the nanny or the parent would have the food, and they would follow them with a spoon of food and put it in their mouth or feed them, but the kids did not have to sit down. So they were amazed when they would see Matthew sitting, whether we were at a pool or in a public space or in a picnic area, he would sit there, he would eat, and then he would go play. And I said, well, isn't it a lot of trouble to run after your children with the spoon and the food? And they were like, well, yeah, but we can't get them to sit down. I said, yes, you can. I said, there's millions of kids that sit down and eat and then play. So why can't you get your, and again, I'm not speaking negatively. There's a Western mindset of independence and discipline, and that sometimes is different from other cultures that I've lived in or been in. So one person specifically said to me, but I can't. They're going to start crying. They'll be hungry. They'll be upset. And I said, so? And they looked at me and they're like, what do you mean, so? And I was like, so let them cry. It's not going to be forever. Let them be hungry for 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. You're teaching them to say no or to follow rules at a young age. I said, how long do you want to run around after your kids? Well, maybe another 6 months, another year. I said, but why? And it was funny because 1 year later, we were back in Indonesia visiting. I saw that family again, and they were still following their child with the spoon. And my son was still like, so I set guidelines, rules, and enforced them kindly when my son was very small, which gave me more freedom and flexibility as he grew. And, again, this is my parenting style. Not all parents will agree with this, but that meant when he was 2 and 3 and 4, there were some tears, there were some frustrations. There were times that he was a bit hungry for, again, not a day, but for a few minutes or half an hour. But he learned the benefits of following some of these things. And it freed me up to focus my time on other things that I could teach him. So as my son was a teenager, yes, he would be frustrated sometimes. We would talk about it. Sometimes I would still say no. Sometimes I would say, okay, I understand, and change it slightly. Instead of midnight, or instead of being home by 10:30, you can be home by 11:30 or whatever the case was. But those things helped to build my son's respect and make more decisions or express his opinions more. Okay, I know we've, again, with our time, there's not a set time, but I was trying to keep it within about an hour, so I'll move. We've already done those questions.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Trevor?
Yeah. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to disturb. Can you please repeat that value that you mentioned? You want Matthew to grow up to become, right?
I might not be able to repeat the exact words. We'll have to watch the replay, but I want my son to make good choices.
Yeah.
And to be independent, I think would be so like, and it's funny because I was listening to a business leader yesterday, and they were talking about how they run their business. And they said, usually a manager says, you do this, you don't do this, you're, a checklist. This is how you do your job. And they said, you need to change that, because otherwise you're always there monitoring your employees. You need to change that to, here's the value our company has. We want the customer to feel welcome. So they gave the example, if breakfast is served at a restaurant until 11 a.m. and it's 11:10 and the customer comes in and wants pancakes, but they don't serve, can't serve pancakes past 11. So if the employee just follows the rules, you have an upset customer. If the value of the company, though, is we want our customers to be to have positive interactions, then you can decide, okay, is it more important to follow the rule or to follow the value, within that? So as Matthew was growing up, I would try to look at, okay, what's the value? I want him to be independent. I want him to make choices. I never told him TV was bad, although I think there's parts of TV or cell phones or YouTube or whatever. There's always parts that are negative. But I always said to him, when you're looking at this, is this good? Is it better? Or is it best? And that then it framed it in a positive way. But I tried to emphasize, and it goes back to what we talked about with YouTube. I'm just jumping up here with these slides, but with YouTube, of how many hours are being uploaded. You can always be watching more than what you have time for. So how are you going to use your time in a way that's beneficial or that's valuable from that? Does that help?
Yeah, you missed one point. You said also you want him to express his feelings freely,
Right.
straightforward, right? Yeah.
And that's hard, because because I grew up in a household where I just followed what my parents said. If I didn't, I was punished. So I struggled in my early 20s to say I like this or I don't like this. Okay. And I think that's similar. If we don't help our kids in some of these areas as they're growing up, then maybe that means that for us, they follow these things, etc. But then what about for once they face those real life situations? And again, I hear so many teens, they go off to university or they're 18, 20, 24, and they're making wrong choices, but they never were allowed to make any choices when they were at home. So we have to see as our kids get older, how do we give them more and more freedom, listen to their opinion, but still make the rules or decide, yes, I will, or no, I won't. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So let me just close off here. Just give me a minute here. Okay, so if we look at some of the action steps for today, so part of why I wanted to have this discussion and bring this up was I'm not always saying there's one right way, but for us to approach and say, okay, how are you handling and thinking of these issues now? So this week, I'd encourage you, think about your feelings, decide what rules or guidelines, and Mohammed, like you said, when they first started, it was an hour a day. Maybe as they get older, maybe it's less, but when they're out of your household, out of your control, they will be making choices, and you need to help them, decide how to make positive choices, or just, we have a crisis in our society today because many kids that are 23, 26, 29 are still at home with their parents, living on their parents' money. And sometimes we have to help our kids if they've had a rough time, but to just year after year after year, live off of us, I don't think is healthy. And I don't agree also of just kicking your child out at age 18. I think that's a misconception that, oh, in America, you just kick your kids out as soon as they're 18. I don't think that's what's happening. But, there's those two extremes. They live with you till they're 30, or they leave when they're 18. We have to reach a balance between that. I asked this question next week, but I really want to put it into this context with social media, because social media has many influencers. It's a term that we use and talk about nowadays. So who's influencing your teens? But more than that, who's inspiring your teens? And for people who've been in my class, they know that, or classes, when I'm teaching, every couple of weeks, I bring in some inspirational video of somebody that struggled with something and has overcome that difficulty. One famous one I use is from America's Got Talent, a lady who she stammers, she has difficulty speaking, but it's a short 8-minute video where when she sings, that doesn't impact her. And especially for my students who are learning English, I show them or identify, like, when have a difficulty, but if you keep working at it, then over time, you can do things that are positive. Even if she never changed her stammer. She still stutters or has difficulty speaking to people, but she learned how to be brave enough to talk to people even with that, or let people laugh at her or look at her funny, in order to be successful in what she wanted to do in life. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Mohammed.
Okay, go ahead, Max.
All right. No, yeah.
Okay. So yesterday, I talked with my wife. Maybe you are planning to go to Lebanon this summer.
Yeah.
So we chat today with my kids. We asked them, what do you think if do you want to go to Lebanon? You know what is the first question for us?
Okay.
If they want to go. You know what is the first question? Is Lebanon have Wi-Fi?
Right. Yep.
So
internet there.
So now internet, and they want to, so now social media is very important for each one, but we have to know how we can, like, keep eye on how they use it, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Thank you for sharing that. I think for teens around the world, whatever countries I've been in, or when I talk to teens, social media is everywhere now, with majority of their friends, and they're using it. But are we using it in a way that's positive or that's not so positive? Now, one thing I'll also add here in this point number 4, sometimes people come to a webinar, or they get new information, or they read an article, they go back to their kids and are like, this is what we're going to do. And I think that can be helpful, but it can also be harmful. If you're going to make some changes or add some guidelines or discuss about social media, first, be in an environment where there's not a lot of stress, or they're not rushing off to a sports event, or they have a test or whatever. Have some time with your child or teen where you're just interacting with them on many topics, and then move it towards the social media. Because I know if my son was stressed or a bit angry, or it was a Friday, end of the week, everything's been busy, and then if I would say, oh, by the way, tomorrow you can't use your cell phone, or tomorrow you can only have 1 hour, he would get really upset, which is natural. We would as well, because it's approaching your child or teen in a time when they're already frustrated or stressed, but if it was Sunday or Monday, and he was relaxed, we had just gone to have a meal together, or went for a walk or whatever, then I say, okay, let's talk about this week. you know, by the way, next Saturday, I know that Sunday you have, or Monday you have this and this and this. So Saturday, let's limit your time to 1 hour or 2 hours. But because we talked about it over the week or in advance, then he was more positive in receiving and talking or dialoguing about that. So that's my encouragement for you. Again, because of our time, I won't have a time for questions. But I do have my email here, and if you sign up at the Google Forms or send me an email, then I can send you a replay from last week and from this week. Some of you I'm also connected with on WeChat or WhatsApp. So in those settings, you know, we can take a look at it. But I jumped over this part, and I just want to highlight this. You know, we say it, there's a saying that's become more common around the world, but it takes a village to raise a child. And so I'm interested in helping your teens be successful and launching them into as they move towards adulthood. And so there's a 6 to 12 month teen mentor program where I have several teachers and mentors in a community, and I'll be sharing more details of that over the next few weeks. But starting in July, I'll be having classes where they are learning about different topics, whether it's academic or life skills related. But every week they will also meet with a trusted adult, a mentor that will help them, and someone that will they can develop a mentor-mentee relationship with, in order to help them become successful as they move towards their own journey in adulthood. Okay, just a reminder, next week, same time, 11 a.m., I'm going to talk about future-proofing our teens. So I want to talk a bit more to us and parents about technology has been making many changes, not just in the last 5 years, but even in the last year with artificial intelligence, etc. So our jobs and how we prepare our teens for their careers, the global economy, our global village, you know, all of these things is what our focus will be on. And I encourage you to join as well as to tell others about it, so that we can share and learn about what's going, you know, what we prepared for is going to change from what our kids and our teens need to be preparing for. So I encourage you to join for that. Good. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for your time. And it's really, this webinar helpful, especially for me, like as I have teens.
Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome.
you. Interesting the topics.
Okay, thank you.
Very
Thank you,
interesting.
Trevor.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Max. Okay. So yeah, thank you guys for joining today. Feel free to reach out through email, or if you've seen some of my information in other platforms, however you heard about me. And then we'll see you, you know, even during the week if you send me an email. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Marina.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for joining, Donna.
Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah, stay cool with the hot weather.
Have a good weekend, teacher.
Okay, yeah. Thank
Everyone.
you. Yeah.